Jeff Bezos responded to his tweet,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. He like gave a shout out to Amazon for some helping them out with.
Yeah. He's
Yeah.
like, yo, Amazon, it's crazy what you do. I bought drones, atmospheric chemicals, and some AI shit all on your platform.
Yeah, and Bezos was like,
I guess
appreciate
the
the
only
shout out, just like casually dapping up one of your homies, like. Welcome back to another episode of Our Future Podcast. I'm your host, Simran Sandhu. I'm joined by my co-founder and co-host, Michael Sikand. And this is the go-to entrepreneurship show for young people. We cover young talent, building really cool companies, and we give you the tactics and strategies on what they're doing to win in business. So why should you be listening to us? Well, Michael and I sold our media company to Morning Brew in our early 20s. And so we feel like we might know a thing or two when it comes to business. But today we're covering two really interesting founders in very different spaces. I think the only common thread here is they're both primed to be billionaires one day. I think that's probably the
No, you missed
what?
one. It's the clouds. They're both
Yes,
impacting and changing how
that's
we use
fair.
the clouds.
Yeah,
Yeah.
one is a little bit more software oriented, and one is a little bit more focused on the physical world. So, Mike,
Yes.
give us
Yes.
some context here. What are we talking about?
Yeah, so I want to talk about our first founder, and he's a 25-year-old named Matthew Prakhurst. And he's built this company called Antimetal alongside his co-founder, Shreyas Iyer. And they're both in their, early mid-20s. Shreyas is young too. So I want to take you back on Matthew. So if you ever think of like the Jordan Belfort meme and the guy who can sell anything, Matthew is that guy. So drops out of high school and gets into automotive sales, pushing used Hondas and Toyotas before finding his way into sales at a private equity firm before joining a venture-backed health insurance company and then a B2B software company. And then he even worked on sales for a futuristic city based off islands in Portugal that raised a bunch of VC money. And now he's focused fully on his new business, Antimetal. So what this business does is helps companies save money on a very, very crucial part of their business, cloud hosting costs, aka Amazon Web Services. So it can be a big expense for a lot of these businesses. And what Matthew was noticing alongside his co-founder Shreyas was this topic called cloudflation, which is, the cloud kind of keeps getting more expensive over time, even though as more resources are thrown into it, you'd think the price would actually come down. But no, that's not been the case. So it's a big pain point. It's quite an expensive part of business. And now with AI and crypto and all these businesses, no matter kind of what hot industry they're targeting, they need a lot of compute power to build these businesses. So yeah, Antimetal helps cut down these costs as a software tool. It kind of functions almost like a dashboard. And it's been super successful. It's raised millions in venture dollars. They're gearing up for a Series A. The company's already profitable and has some really, really great metrics. So excited to dive into this one.
Yeah, and I love the business model for these guys because they're not actually asking you to put down any money, right? It's just, hey, let us take a percentage of the savings that we deliver for you. And I feel like if you're early and you don't necessarily have like a big brand, it's the best way to try to sell a client, which is like, hey, there's no risk here, right? We're only going to eat what we kill. And what's funny about that is like, I've noticed as of recent, there's been less innovation and creativity when it comes to actual concepts and businesses that people are building, but more creativity around the business models. And I think we're going to see businesses kind of play into this, right? Like less of the, hey, just put us on a retainer, or hey, just put us on a subscription, and give us a higher percentage of the value we deliver for you or your business.
I think that's completely valid. I think it's just so hard for people to actually spend upfront money on anything. I think to Lendtable, which we covered a few episodes back, and they're doing they're helping you access your 401k early, and they kind of just take a cut of what the 401k grew to, as opposed to you paying to use that service. So another great low friction business model to get people in the door, get people using the service. It's weird. You might end up paying more in your savings than you would on a subscription basis, right? But it's just that psychological, that mental aspect to it that gets people in the door quicker. And to speak to this business model, Matthew said he sold everything, right? From cars to software to private equity deals. And he said this is by far the easiest thing he's ever sold. And maybe that's like the path, the golden path of a salesman. He sells a lot of shit and eventually he lands on that thing that is going to make him really, really rich because he just knows how to sell and it's just like the easiest thing to do. So people love free money. And that's what Antimetal promises.
You know, there's that saying around how you don't have to ask when you have product market fit, you just know, right? Like people are coming inbound, there's strong demand for what you're doing. I bet there's this really funny thing that's happened because of COVID and the whole ZERP thing, which was like money was abundant. And like, you didn't have to be a good salesman to sell your product. Like if it sounded remotely interesting enough, people would spend crazy money and get in these really big contracts with people. And I think now that the dust has settled, you're coming to realize who is actually a good salesperson and who actually has a good product versus kind of like the more just, okay, that was a COVID phenomena. Like that's not like they're not really that good at their jobs. And I've heard a lot about this recently in the sales space, which is like salespeople are getting decimated right now because most of them are burnt out. They're actually not great salespeople, but COVID gave them the allure to make them think, hey, we're just great salespeople. Look at how much volume of business we drove for this company. And that's just not the case. So yeah, I think in their case, it's like AWS is really expensive and it's really complex. And you know, on their website, they say they can deliver up to 75% in savings through their software that they've created. And what they're really doing is they're optimizing for usage times, right? Like some people just aren't really cognizant of the way they're using AWS. And so they're getting dinged on certain things and they just don't know better. And, you know, they end up getting these massive bills.
Lights on. Yeah, it's like when you leave the lights on in your house, right? Like everybody does it. But like it could make all the difference, right? In terms of your energy bill. And, you know, the AWS bill is the modern day like equivalent of a startup's electricity costs, right? Or the startup's utility costs,
totally.
Right? One thing I thought that was really interesting about what he said is he said if there was a compute ETF, he would put all of his savings into that. And I was like, damn, that's conviction right there. You know, he said that compute is this common thread between all the hot industries, right? Like whether it's AI or crypto, no matter which of those spaces is winning, compute always wins, right? So compute is this infrastructure that powers all these futuristic industries. And that's really what you should be focused on. So he's obsessed with it. He's all in on it. And it was really cool. He's like, yeah, I'm all in on compute.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. I mean, I think the interesting thing about this is that they've identified a great opportunity, but is still kind of on the backs of Amazon, right? And so the challenge is like, how do you position yourself in a way that Amazon sees you as an asset and not a threat, right? Because the money that you're saving for their clients is money that's not going to Amazon. Now, what's really interesting is they figured that out, and they are actually like a preferred vendor or preferred partner of Amazon. And so,
managed service provider.
And so AWS will actually refer over clients of theirs to these guys. And I was like, what a great model. It's literally like Amazon is sending you free money. It's like, go work with these guys. They'll help you save money on our platform. I'm curious on like what happens after a certain scale. Like, does this become one of those things where, you know, this business is doing $100 million a year at some point? And Amazon pulls kind of their traditional play of like, okay, well, clearly this is a big enough opportunity. We're just going to roll this back in house.
Yeah. It's just like, they'll do the same shit with like sneakers and batteries. And it's like, welcome. It's like anti-metal basics. It's like one day he wakes up and the same shit with the same website is there on Amazon. Jeff Bezos is offering that shit. I don't know if he mentioned, like, you asked him that question and he said that it wasn't a major risk. And speaking of the managed service provider thing, I think our buddy, you know, that guy who did the cybersecurity business we talked about?
Taylor. He was the same thing.
He was also a managed service provider for Amazon. Yeah. And he was able to tap into that network and get referred to a lot of clients.
Yeah. The SOC 2 stuff, which was like compliance. I think those businesses make a lot of sense when it's a product that the business can't go without using. And so, you know, in Taylor's case, it was like people had to meet these standards to win enterprise contracts, right? And so it was like one of those things that it was a necessity. It wasn't a nice to have. Same thing with this, right? Like software businesses need that cloud. They need AWS, right? Like without it, they can't operate. So that is like a very need to have business. Have you seen a lot of business models like this in other categories, which is like been, hey, we'll help you save based on usage here, and that's going to be how we make money. Have you seen this applied in other areas?
I don't know if any come to mind other than Lendtable, which I mentioned. It definitely feels more like a B2B
Sure.
business model. I think rarely you could look at like Facebook and Google where there's this implicit contract that the service is free, but you're going to give us data that we can monetize. But it definitely makes more sense in a B2B setting. I also think it's a lot easier to cut fat than grow sales, if that makes sense. So like it's a lot harder to lose weight than gain weight. I think in business, it's easier to lose weight than gain weight when it comes to revenue. So no wonder all these private equity companies focus on cutting costs versus growing revenue, right? It's just harder to do. So I think this is a harder pitch for any business that like you need to actually produce new sales. So like I'll give you an example. Like at the start, in the earlier days of Our Future, I tried to work with like a few agents, and it was always like, look, not going to give you anything, but you can take 20% of any brand deals you sell. And like none of them ever sold a single brand deal for me. And it's because it's like too hard of work to do for no penny.
Yeah.
That makes
Totally.
sense.
I think though that you can only cut costs to a certain point after a certain, like once you will get to like a certain level where you truly cannot cut anymore, right? Like you've skinned the bear as much as you can. And so I think the way most big companies think about it is how do you grow revenue but maintain costs? Right. So it's their focus, it becomes to grow revenue. And I think I would argue that most cost savings things are also still focused on how do we save or how do we maintain costs while we can kind of increase our top line. And that's actually where the growth happens in your margins and in the business, right? What I think is interesting about this is like, I love this business model. I think the challenge will be in other areas is like, how do you attribute this? Like I could see someone exploiting this to an extent, right? Which is like, hey, we delivered X amount in savings, but there's not a real way where you can tell where the savings came from. Like, how do you know, like that for every X amount of usage, like you delivered X amount in savings? And so I could see startups in other areas. Maybe that's not the case in AWS, but taking advantage. And now you're in a point where you as the client, you're a little unsure if they did the work that they said they did, but now you have a massive bill that you have to pay out to these people because they've claimed they've delivered X amount of savings for you.
Yeah. But they don't take any of the money. Like it just comes from the savings that occurred.
Yeah, but I bet there's like other models out there, especially in services, where people are probably doing things like that. Like, hey, if we, I bet this is probably like e-com SaaS playbook, right? Like, there's probably tons of SaaS providers in there who are like using Shopify, and they're like, hey, let's help you increase your site speed, for example, right? Not picking out them, but it's like we help you increase your site speed, and you give us a percentage of this, and it's like, well, did that increased site speed actually lead to more deals? I don't know.
So if you had a startup in B2B SaaS, would you rather be cutting costs or growing revenue?
Growing revenue, for sure. For sure. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. But I mean,
so you'd rather fight it out with all these sales tech, MarTech companies that are trying to promise that same thing?
I think I would be very cognizant of where my spend is, and I would try to like keep it as low as possible. But like at the end of the day, I'm not in a cost saving business. I'm in a grow revenue kind of business, right? Like I need to make it scale, right? And you have to spend money to make money. Like that's a fact, right? Like you can't operate with this scarcity mindset. You have to think abundantly. You have to be able to invest in different channels. I think you have to be smart though, is like if you see a new opportunity, you have to match your investment with the growth taking place, right? You can't just go all in and the growth doesn't match it, and now you took a stupid bet and you lost all your money or you overspent, right? So it's like, you kind of got to dip your toes in the water before you take the full dive. And I think that's kind of the play here is like, how can you grow revenue, but do so in a way that like, man, you didn't have to make a huge CapEx investment or spend a shit ton of money to try to get there. And then it ends up not being a profitable sales channel for you.
Yeah. What I was referring to is like, if you had a
Yeah.
startup, would you rather, if you were doing a B2B company, would your product be in growing revenue for brands or cutting costs?
Growing
for them?
revenue. Yeah, I would still, even in that, in the way you phrase that, it would still be in growing revenue. I think when it comes to growing revenue, people can get greedy, right? Like, it's like, oh, you're telling me you can help me make X
For
amount more
sure.
money?
Yeah.
That's an easier sell than trying to go with the CFO type mindset, which is like, let's just help you cut costs in X amount of way. In this specific aspect, I think that,
Okay. Yeah. So
Yeah.
you're saying there's a larger window for irrational thought that leads to buying decisions, which would benefit your business.
Totally. And it's an easier sell.
Yeah.
Like, you're
Okay.
not going to go to your investors and say, hey, like, we cut costs by 30% this month. And that's not all that compelling unless you were just burning through money. And like, it was like, you guys really need to change the things you're doing. What's more exciting is saying, hey, we grew our top line from 1 to 10 million this year. And like, we 2x the business. Like, that like even if you think about it, like exits at some point, right? Like after you probably do over $1 to $2 million in revenue, at least this is the case in software. Like now people are giving you multiples, not necessarily off of your profit, but off of your top line, right? So like there is an incentive to grow that as quick as possible. I think when it's a smaller business, that's when people are really focused on profit. Like, okay, you're doing 100K a year. Like, how much of that are you taking home? But you will get a certain point, and I think that's what happens with these big software companies, which is like they're growing so fast, top line is growing, and now they're getting evaluated at 15x, 20x, their top line revenue. So I would probably argue that's like probably the most important metric. And I think, again, even cost savings is a focus of leading to increased revenue.
Sure. And to go even like deeper on this topic, I think you can do either, but you need a great compass to attribute revenue, right? That's like even more important than the business model, is being able to attach X action with Y result, right? So sure, I can grow your revenue, but you need to know you're growing your revenue through me. Or you need to know you're cutting your costs.
Attribution's so important. So totally.
Attribution's everything today, because people just are in business are built in this very data-driven, numbers-driven way, and you have to be able to make the equation make sense. Otherwise, your product could be at risk of getting cut like the rest of every subscription right now, right? So yeah, I think it really does come down to like who's doing what and how can you show that to me. But one more thing I want to say is I thought was interesting. Matthew said he's had some conversations with like really big companies like McDonald's and life insurance businesses and massive brands, and he's actually moved away from that. I feel like a lot of businesses aspire to graduate into this blue chip B2B environment with their product, but he's like, nah, let's focus on small to medium sized startups and let's cut cloud costs for them. And he said that their new product they launched is more focused on this smaller business. And it's grown to 1.2 million ARR in like 10 weeks. And he's just like, he's mind blown.
That makes sense. It's like kind of like the HubSpot playbook, right? Like you're going to get less competitors operating with smaller, medium-sized businesses because everyone's focused at the blue chip and enterprise level. Everyone wants to be Salesforce and no one's trying to think about that's where that window opens up. And it's like there are smaller dollars to be made there. So you need a higher volume of companies and clients.
And you need a more automated product.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you're going to serve a larger volume of customers, you better make sure that it's not a headache for you. Right? Like, in the agency world, everybody would say the goal is to get a couple of clients paying top dollar versus having 30 clients paying $1,000.
Yeah.
Right? But in tech, you don't have that necessity to depend on this like manual labor, human involvement, project management, right? You can build a good enough software product that can serve, the small to medium sized player in the market.
That brings up a really interesting point too, because what I've noticed is when it comes to software that is focused on helping optimize a certain thing for a company or client, they have a lot of agency competitors, right? It's a lot of people running services businesses also helping you to do the same thing. You see this a lot in the marketing space. The great thing with them is that with cloud, it's running 24/7. There is no way someone is going to be watching your cloud usage 24/7 around the clock and can beat this software. I think it's a little bit different when it comes to paid
Oh yeah,
ads,
yeah.
right? Or something where it's like, okay, you're just optimizing the inputs and then you just kind of let the machine do its thing. But this is why it's so great. It's like there's not an arbitrage that exists at the services level. And I think that's a really
Yeah.
smart aspect to this business.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no one who can look at this shit other
Yeah,
than
you
a
like,
fucking robot.
yeah, like you can't, I don't care. You can't even outsource it, right? Like you can't arbitrage
Yeah.
this with overseas talent. It doesn't matter if you have 3 guys staring at the computer, right? Like they can't accurately predict when those spikes are going to happen and help you kind of avoid
Right.
that in the first place. But it's
Yeah.
it's a
You said
cool
it was all a
business
data
for
game.
sure.
All a data analytics dashboard game. But let's segue into the next
Let's
story.
do it. So, next business is super interesting. It's a business called Rainmaker, and it was started by this 23-year-old Berkeley dropout. His name is Augustus Doricko, and I'm so excited to get your take on what you think about him. But yeah, drops out of Berkeley, data science guy, and essentially his goal is to help make it rain wherever you are in the world. And the way that they're doing that is through this thing called cloud seeding. So the way that it works is, they're creating these drones, and these drones have these chemicals on them, right? And these chemicals are dropped into these clouds, and it enables the clouds to drop rain, or in this case, precipitation, right? And so this is a huge need for this in place like California, which you are based, and there's just wildfires are abundant. I think in any area where there's a lot of high risk for natural disasters, this is something that you would need. Now, the big difference is cloud seeding has been around for a really long time, but the big distinction between traditional cloud seeding and what these guys are doing is that traditional cloud seeding has been dependent on, the atmospheric conditions. In what Augustus is doing, it doesn't matter what the atmospheric conditions are for cloud seeding. They're just simply focusing on geography, which is anywhere there needs to be rain, they will figure a way to, mix the right set of chemicals with the clouds to invoke this rain to happen. And so really, really cool business. They've raised over $5 million. And the guy just is eccentric. He's got a great personality. I saw some posts where he was like, Prometheus gave the man fire, and Rainmaker is going to give the man rain. And I just thought that was hilarious.
Dude, Augustus Doricko, is
Augustus
that his name?
Doricko, yeah.
Dude, the guy is like playing God. Like he wants to make it rain wherever. Like you talk about delusional founders. What about founders who think they can control the weather, bro? That's crazy. And I don't know if he can do it, but it's a really cool idea. And I think VCs are going to get really excited about the
Totally.
vision.
He's the right kind of crazy,
but-
for sure. Like he embodies all of those like larger than life characteristics that I think VCs are just like hungry for.
Yeah, I mean, this feels like almost similar to Pipe Dream in that it's deep tech and it's super visionary, and it's a massive swing on the industry or on something that's never really been done before.
Totally.
I think on Twitter, Jeff Bezos responded to his tweet,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, he like gave a shout out to Amazon for some helping them out with
Yeah. He's like, yo, Amazon, it's crazy what you do. I bought drones, atmospheric chemicals, and some AI shit all on your platform.
Yeah, and Bezos is like, appreciate the shout out. Just like casually dapping up one of your homies. Like
Is he an investor? Jeff Bezos should invest in this. I feel like this would be a Jeff Bezos investable company.
Maybe farther along down the road. I mean, they're still pretty early. The company started in April of last year, so they've only been around for 10, 11 months. But it's crazy. Like they've got drones, and you can see the videos. Like they're like actually out. It's not just something that's only on paper. Like they've moved past the ideation phase.
That's cool.
Yeah.
It feels kind of like very dystopian
It does.
almost.
It does. You know,
It's like it's
yeah.
almost it makes me think like the government can control the weather and therefore will like punish certain farmers and not make rainfall on their crops if they don't pay their taxes, right? Like what if the what if this could escalate to government, government control of the weather?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's next level,
Dude, there's
dog.
so much there. Before we jump into like kind of the more details within this business, one thing that I thought was really funny, right? So you text me last night and you're like, dude, how much did this company raise? And I'm like going through Crunchbase, I'm like typing in Rainmaker, and you best believe there's like 50 results on it's literally entertainment, media companies, and agencies all named Rainmaker, like implying they're just
Everybody.
like making so much money for these companies. And I was like, it would be an
I
agency
saw the same
named
thing.
Rainmaker.
Not everybody can be
Yeah.
Rainmaker,
Yeah.
okay? Not everybody can do it.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, finally, we found a company that like embodies the name, right? They are physically making rain happen.
I know.
So I think that
Yeah.
I thought that was funny. But you know what's interesting about this is like typically how this is done, right? So typically you have these ground-based generators and you have airplanes that are doing this, right? Like they'll drop water or like they'll try to do this cloud seeding approach. And that's extremely expensive. Like that's really not durable, right? So this becomes similar to pipe dream that we were talking about last week, in that you have to find the cheapest mechanism to deliver this product, or in this case these chemicals, to enable this to happen.
Yeah, man. I already know the biggest customer for this business is going to be the Middle East.
Yeah.
Like Dubai, UAE, like as more population moves there, it's going to be mission critical to get more water in those regions. Who do you think is going to be the big buyer of these services? Government or like agricultural companies?
They're probably tied together to some extent, because like the government is subsidizing most of agriculture that already exists, right? I could see the government, I mean, they already have a customer. And so their first contract was with this company called EW Merritt Farms. Are you familiar?
Okay, so an agricultural
Yeah, are you familiar with them? But my hunch is that this will
No.
become more government focused as the capabilities expand beyond just, pure play agriculture. Like the natural disaster use case for this makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, this feels like a David Friedberg
It
business.
does.
He'd also be like, I feel like a perfect investor. I guess his last business was helping farmers predict the weather and therefore better insure against damage and lower crop yields and such.
Yeah,
So,
and you know what's interesting about this is they said the global demand for cloud seeding is expected to grow to a market of $212 billion by 2028. Like, so in the next 4 years, this is going to be over a $200 billion industry.
does this shit even work though?
Like make rain?
Yeah, like
I mean, conceptually, yes, because it's being done already, right? Like the cloud seeding is already happening. I don't know like how big of
they're
a
just
program
using
it is.
drones.
I just know that it's extremely expensive in its current format.
Right. So it makes sense, right? Like they're already doing it with planes and ground generators. They're just bringing like the 21st century Silicon Valley approach to it with drones and chemicals and probably great
The software is
and
huge
AI.
because they're like optimizing like
software
the
is probably
perfect
super
condition
important.
to mix the chemicals and what part that looks like, what part of the area that they hit to get like the maximum yield. So it is like that combination of just like great technology, but also just like innovative thinking mixed together.
I really love this company's branding. I think they did a really good job of like positioning it, making it look good. I like this more than like even Pipe
Yeah.
Dream. Like get a burrito in 5 minutes or like save the world from drought. It's like, which startup would I rather make me a billionaire through an angel investment would be the second
Dude, I would
one.
have thought you were saying that just because there's a fire in your backyard like every other day.
I'm bullish on this company, but I will be very upset if they pivot into doing food delivery. once the cloud stuff doesn't work out, I'm going to be very, very angry because they had a good vision for making it rain
Dude,
on Earth.
yeah, dude, It's wild. I mean, look, I'm looking at this cloud seeding benefits graphic that they have on their website, and right now they've identified 8 different use cases. Right, so we already talked for rain. We already talked about the rain for agriculture. They've got hail suppression on here. Apparently, hail damages crops and properties, so Rainmaker can prevent that from happening. They've got supplementing hydroelectric dams. Right, so dams need water, they're going to go bring the water to these dams. Terraforming, Rainmaker will turn deserts green. That goes back to the Saudi in Middle East comment that you made. Logistics, Rainmaker can keep trucks, trains, or planes from being bogged down by inclement weather. And this one is a crazy one.
Can they also wait? They can make it rain, but they can also stop making it rain. How the hell do they do that?
I don't know. That one's beyond the scope.
Dude, I read this graphic too last night, and I was like, some of these are kind of a stretch.
This one too, hurricane mitigation. Cloud seeding can break hurricanes before they reach shore.
Bro, you're telling me you're going to put a 5-pound drone in the eye of a hurricane? It's going to stop that motherfucker? No way.
Dude, it depends on what the drone is carrying.
It's all like, FEMA calls Augustus and is like, dude, we need this hurricane taken out. Like, we've tried everything.
Yeah, dude. Bzz. Exactly. Bzz. You know what's crazy about this too is like, what if this drone gets shot down or something, right? Like, it's just going to be like radioactive chemical. At least I see this just like.
I don't want no rain. see some drones going over like my friend Billy's farm, and it's like, nah, bro.
This is really like kind of horrible, but also a little funny at the same time. I had this idea when I was like in the senior year of college. And I was talking to my roommate about this, which is like, hey, what if there were like drones that could deliver, medicine in certain parts of the world where like they just need it and it's not very accessible to them. And we were like doing some research on this, and apparently there's many companies that already do this, right? Like, so they'll bring like
Zipline.
Zipline is one of them. But like, in Africa, they were being shot down all the time. Like the tribes and stuff, or like the people were like shooting down these care packages of sorts. And so apparently it was like a huge issue there. And I was just like, well, there goes our idea. Yeah.
Damn, that's fun.
Yeah. It's horrible. But yeah, tough out here to be a drone company.
Some people just aren't here for it. Some people just can't comprehend the future.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about the potential risks for this business. One, I think.
Oh, this is a laundry list.
Yeah,
bro. This is this could be the whole episode. It's just risks.
No, I meant like a risk beyond just like commercializing this, right? Like,
okay, risk number 1: it can't make it rain.
Okay.
Risk number 2: toxic chemicals in the atmosphere.
Also fair.
Risk number 3: the tribe shoot it down. No, but if you want to seriously talk about the risk, we can. It just feels like, the risks are quite clear.
And then I think it also becomes, again, back to commercialization aspect of things. Like, this is like a huge FFA challenge, right? Like, they're going to have to get buy-in from the government, and like, they're probably not, that's probably not easy. I don't know what it's like trying to negotiate with, a government entity of any kind.
Yeah, but the one like silver lining to that is like, there's these like governments like the Middle East are just so open to innovation right now. Like it's just like literally turkey hunting out there. If you're looking to get government contracts for like any kind of like futuristic city tech, AI, software, recruiting, like that's a place to make so much money right now. I think it's just worth mentioning.
That's really interesting. So it's almost like choosing the right playground for an idea like this.
If they chose the right playground and just set up shop in Abu Dhabi and then like essentially like presided over, I don't know, like a couple of miles of geography, and then really showed the product like working and being effective, like that's really, I think, how this business grows.
Yeah.
Instead of having a disparate operation, they really need a city that's going to take a chance on them. And even if one of these motherfuckers drops from the sky and like kills somebody, like they're gonna back them.
And also, like, that is probably the best funding source for a business like this. Like, they have the means to go put in 9-10 figures for, you know, an ambitious.
No, this is a sovereign wealth fund business for sure. Once they can get a little more traction, for sure.
All right.
And get some bigger names on the cap table.
Yeah, totally. All right, guys. Well, I think that wraps up another episode of Our Future Podcast. Appreciate you all for tuning in. Give us a rating and subscribe wherever you listen to this podcast, and we will catch you again next week. Stay frosty, everyone.
All right, stay frosty. Peace.